5 seconds. That is what Lewis Hamilton was given in Monaco. It is what he was given at Silverstone. It is what he was given at Spa. And it is what he was given again in Hungary. 4 penalties, 4 different sets of people handing them down, and the number never moved. Start with the part almost nobody outside the paddock knows, because it changes how you watch every one of those decisions. There is no standing court in Formula One. Every Grand Prix weekend has a panel of 4 stewards, and that panel is assembled for that event. The Federation confirmed ahead of this season that it would keep the rotation system rather than move to permanent officials, and that each weekend would still be judged by 4 people. On some weekends, a 5th joins, a trainee from the Federation's own high-performance stewarding program, there to gain experience alongside the others. 3 driver stewards were selected for the year to rotate through those seats, so the judges change, the sanction does not. Subscribe before we go on because this is the 3rd part of a series and the first 2 are the reason this one exists. And tell me in the comments which country you are watching from. That question gets more replies here than anything else and I read them. Now, the person best placed to complain about all of this is the person who complains least, and that is why his words carry. Fred Vasseur has to walk into that room 40-odd times a year. He runs a team that needs the benefit of the doubt on track limits, on unsafe releases, on first-lap contact. Attacking the officials publicly is the worst business decision available to him. He is also the man who, at Silverstone, described his own rebuild with Hamilton as small stone after small stone, refusing even to call it a turning point. That is how carefully he speaks. This is what that man said in July to Crash.net about the false start penalty. From the sensors, they do not see the car moving on the grid. On the video, you can see the sticker on the tires move a little bit. And then he said it is not him judging whether it was a false start. And then he said the thing this whole video is about. The stewards do not comment on their decisions, so they have to accept it. Put that sentence on the stand. Who decided? 4 people appointed for that weekend. What did they decide? That car, 44, moved after the 3rd red light and before the start signal. On what basis? Onboard video. What was the reasoning? Not published. Who can ask them to explain? Nobody. Can the team appeal the reasoning? A team can request a review under Article 14 of the Sporting Code, but that requires a significant and relevant new element, not a disagreement with the logic. So what does a team principal do when he thinks it was harsh? He says it was harsh, once, and moves on to the next weekend, where there will be 4 different people. Now follow the chain into Monaco, because we covered this case in full 2 videos ago, and it is the mirror. 5 drivers were penalized there for exceeding the pit lane limit by 1/10 of a kilometer an hour. Formula One management later admitted in front of the stewards that the distance used to calculate those speeds was wrong, and a scan taken after the event found the gap between the timing loops was 77 centimeters shorter than the figure loaded into the system. Alpine brought that evidence through Article 14 and had Pierre Gasly's penalties struck out. Hamilton, Piastri, and Russell had served theirs during the race, and served penalties cannot be given back. Set the 2 weekends beside each other in one line. In Monaco, a team went and found the proof itself at its own cost and won. At Silverstone, there was no proof to find because there was no explanation to test. Each of those outcomes is defensible on its own terms. That is what makes this worth 20 minutes of your time rather than a shouting match. Then the timeline moves, and this is the part that has not been discussed anywhere near enough. The rules changed this year. Under the 2026 International Sporting Code, the stewards can now re-examine their own decisions on their own initiative when a significant and relevant new element comes to light. Before this season, that door only opened if a team pushed it, because the right of review under Article 14 belonged to the addressees of the decision. The Federation also created a panel of 5 non-competition stewards who can rule between events, including during the summer shutdown, so a case no longer has to wait for the next race. Read what that means against everything above. The sport gave itself the power to reopen cases without being asked. In the same season in which one driver has taken 4 5-second penalties from 4 different panels, and in which one of those penalties was handed down under a standard that the drivers themselves say is unsettled. Hamilton told Racing News, 365 and others in Hungary that the false start decision had been discussed in the driver's briefing, and that the stewards were looking into the matter. The tool exists now. It has not been picked up. So here is your vote. and I want it in the likes. You are running a team, your driver has just taken a penalty you believe is wrong, and you have two options, both bad. You file under Article 14, spend the money, drag the officials into a hearing, win maybe once in 10 attempts, and remember that you have to face those same officials for the rest of the season. Or you say it was harsh, once, and protect the relationship. Like this video if you file. Comment if you keep quiet. Vasseur chose the second one after Silverstone and Alpine chose the first one after Monaco, and only one of them has a podium to show for it. Turn 5 seconds into points because that is the only currency that matters here. At Silverstone, Hamilton served his at the first stop, fought back to second, then lost the place to Russell when Ferrari pitted him under a late safety car and the race finished behind it. He came out of that weekend 32 points behind Kimi Antonelli. By the Hungarian weekend, that gap was 45 points. In Hungary, the 5-second pit lane penalty turned a 4th place into a 5th, on a day when 3rd had been live earlier in the race, and it arrived on top of a 3-place grid drop from the day before. None of those individual numbers decides a championship. Add them, and you are looking at the difference between chasing and being chased. And the drivers have been saying the structural part out loud for years, long before this season. Back in 2024, Sergio Perez said the answer was either permanent stewards or better communication inside the federation to build consistency race after race. Valtteri Bottas, in the same period, said consistency had improved, but that it is still not always the same people deciding, and that different stewards bring different opinions based on their experience and their background. George Russell, as president of the Drivers' Association, has made the absence of permanent stewards his central argument for why decisions do not line up. That is competitors from 3 different teams describing the same design feature. Not a conspiracy. A rota, which brings us to what the Federation actually reformed this year and what it did not. It moved toward clearer penalty frameworks, tying specific infringements to fixed sanction ranges, explicitly so that different panels would produce less variation. It improved the data the stewards work with. It encouraged more detailed published reasoning. And it kept the rotation, while the people doing the judging still receive an expense allowance rather than a salary, a situation the Federation itself is reportedly reconsidering, partly because paying properly might attract former drivers who currently prefer television work, so the sport standardized the punishment and left the panel rotating. Fix the sanction, keep the judges moving. That is why the number is always 5 seconds and the reasoning is never the same twice. The best argument against this entire video is a good one, and it comes with data. The race went through a full season of decisions and found that the overwhelming majority are uncontroversial and consistent, and that the debate gets distorted by the handful that are not. The rotation is deliberate, not lazy, and it is meant to prevent a single fixed group of people from developing a single fixed set of blind spots over a decade. Permanent stewards would not remove disagreement, it would concentrate it. And on the specific cases in this series, Hamilton has said himself that the last 2 races before Hungary were bad from his side, and that he takes ultimate responsibility. All of that stands. And it still does not answer the one question a rotating panel with no published reasoning cannot answer, which is how a team is meant to argue with a decision it cannot see the inside of. Subscribe before the last part, because the Zandvoort weekend is where 2 open threads in this story land at once. Here is the reading. Nobody in this story has been shown to have targeted Lewis Hamilton. I am not claiming that. And if someone hands you that conclusion off the back of these documents, they are selling you something. What is on the record is smaller and harder. The same 5-second penalty came from 4 different panels in 4 months. The team principal who received them said publicly that the officials do not explain themselves, and that the only available response is acceptance. The sport gave itself a new power this season to reopen its own decisions, and has not used it on any of them. And the standard behind one of those 4 penalties is, by the driver's own account, still being looked at. Whether a sport can hand out automatic fixed penalties from a bench that changes every weekend and publishes no reasoning is a legitimate question, and it is open. What I cannot tell you is why nobody has invoked the new self-review power yet, or whether the Federation considers any of these 4 cases to qualify. That has not been stated publicly, and I am not going to guess at it, because the guess is exactly what this series refuses to do. The Dutch Grand Prix runs from the 21st to the 23rd of August at Zandvoort, with a new panel, a tight pit entry, and the McLaren and Red Bull appeals against the Monaco decision still live in the system. So give me one word. Permanent stewards, yes or no? Put it in the comments, and I will read the count at the top of the next video. Like it if you want that count. Subscribe so you get it. Until the next one.